I'll never forget the words, keep your eye on the ball. Keep your eye on the ball. Keep your eye on the ball. And they always sounded like I had done something wrong. Keep your eye on the ball. I remember standing at home plate. And as I was up to bat, the pitch came in, and it was the perfect pitch for me. And I stepped in with the perfect form, and I swung from the waist, and I put everything I had into it. Crack! The bat and the ball finally lined up in just the right spot. You know that spot where the Louisville Slugger logo is? And if the ball hits that spot, bam, the bat shatters. And it did. The bat shattered all over the ground, broke right in half. And the ball took off toward the air. And then it landed on the ground about 2 feet from the outfield fence in center field. And I stood there in absolute amazement that the ball hit the bat. And after a couple of seconds, reality set in. And everyone was yelling, run! You have to run! And I thought, but I hit the ball. Why do I have to run? And that was my very first ever inside the park home run. And I was 7. I remember some 15 years later playing softball with guys from the fire department, and maybe I'm just really, really slow. But the phrase, keep your eye on the ball, kept coming up again. Keep your eye on the ball, keep your eye on the ball. I'm like, I'm watching the ball. It's flying at me, I'm swinging at it, I'm watching the ball. I see the ball. But it was like this esoteric phrase, keep your eye on the ball. It was like, I've got my eye on you. I had no idea what exactly they meant. Keep your eye on the ball. Here's what they were really, really saying. Stare at the ball. In fact, I remember later an actual coach, a pitching coach and a hitting coach, as they were talking about the phrase, keep your eye on the ball. And I had never heard it explained quite like this. The guy said, if you can see the stitches and tell which way the ball is rotating before it gets to home plate, you will hit it. I thought, well, that's just silly. If it's moving that slow, anybody could hit it. But really what he was saying is if your focus and your concentration are so tight on that ball as it's coming at you, on that ball as it's flying through the air, on that ball so that you can determine is it too high or too low, too close, too far away? Is it in the strike zone? Or is it in a perfect spot for me to knock it out of the park? All of those decisions should be like in instances within your mind, but fractions of a second. But you've got to be staring intently focused at that ball to be able to pull that off. And if you're not, then the concept of keeping your eye on the ball is an abstract, esoteric concept. The idea of keeping your eye on the ball is like, yeah, I'm watching you. I got my eye on you. How often do we allow the words that we say to be abstract, esoteric, ethereal even? They sound heavenly. I'll pray for you, but they mean nothing because we're not actually going to do anything that we said we would do. If you want to live a more excellent life, you're going to have to start working on the words that come out of your mouth and the words that come into your ears, because they are a cycle. They are a complete cycle. Everything that you say, you also hear. Let that soak in for a second. Everything that you say, you also hear. Now let me add to that, because there are really 3 things, and this is in chapter 10 of Live a More Excellent Life. Again, if you don't have the copy of the book, you can get it on Amazon. The chapter is called The Antique Looking Glass, and we're talking about the power of your words. You've got to consider the validity, you've got to consider the motivation, and you've got to consider the source when we talk about the words that impact your life. The validity. Are the words meaningful? Are the words that are spoken to you, like keep your eye on the ball, do they have some strategic merit? Will they actually accomplish something in your life if you were to take them in? So if someone were to say to you, I can't believe you drink tap water. I love my water. But is it filtered water? Or is it fluoride water? Or does it have all kinds of chemicals and chlorine in it? Is it reverse osmosis water? Is it Kangen water? Well, water is water, right? Well, no, it's not. Because you wouldn't want to drink out of a mud puddle. So when we talk about the validity of words, understanding where those words come from, consider the source, is not just about the person who spoke them, although that's very, very true. Understanding the true meaning behind the word is very important as well. I used to work with a guy who would say on a regular basis when he got angry, I was just living it. I was just living it. And this went on for many, many months. And there was a day that he and I were having a conversation, and the whole team was around, the same team that had heard him say living it forever. And he said, so how did that make you feel? I said, I was actually quite livid. I was very angry when that happened. And a few minutes later, he showed up at my desk when there was nobody else around, and he said, so livid, is that a real word? And I said, yeah, you can look it up, L-I-V-I-D. He said, and so as long as you've worked here, you've heard me say living it. And I said, yeah. He said, were you ever going to tell me that I was making up nonsense words? And I said, and when the student's ready, the teacher will come, I guess is the best way I can answer that question. Because if I had approached you while you were living it or livid and said to you, that's the wrong word, or there's a better word for that, or you're not saying that right, I don't think that the time would have been a valid time to tell you that you were wrong. Because obviously you're already in a heightened state of emotion and you're already angry. What am I going to accomplish? And he just kind of looked at me for a minute and he said, okay, point well taken. Now I want you to step back for a moment and ask yourself, how often do the words come at you? And the words that come at you seem to have dramatic impact because they land in your life, in your heart, in your mind, in your soul, at a time when your sensitivity to those words is already elevated. And so they seem to mean more. They seem to carry more weight. They seem more valid. Maybe, though, you've had those words that are spoken to you and someone says something to you that really makes them feel better. It makes them seem intelligent. It makes them, not you, but them feel like I'm superior. Well, you should have known that. And so that validity, the validity of the words, not just the meaning of the words, but how they're applied. And do they apply to you? In previous chapters, we've talked about the effect of people who have been beaten down. We talked about peg moments. We also talked about, in previous chapters of this book, those times in life when your reaching for success offends people who refuse to reach for success. They don't want to exert the effort, like the crabs or the lobsters in a barrel. They don't want to get out, but they don't want you to get out either. And sometimes the validity of their words mirrors that. The idea that they want no one to succeed, because it's easier to blame everyone else for their own failure. And if someone gets free, if someone finds success, if someone from this level in life proves that we can all accomplish whatever we set our minds to, then it proves that I'm wrong, that I'm the failure, that I'm not disciplined enough, that I'm not trying hard enough, that I'm not, right? So it's easier for me to say words to you, to demean you, to criticize you, to pull you down. I know you've experienced that. And if you've been guilty of that, I'm going to challenge you right now. Stop doing that. If you have an opportunity to speak words that lift someone up over the edge of the barrel and push them on to freedom, I don't mean throw them to the wolves, but to give them the opportunity to be free, those words are the words you should be speaking. So you've got to consider the validity. Are these words that really will help my life get better? Are these words that if I take them in, and they may be hard words. They may be someone speaking to you going, if you don't stop eating 14 Twinkies for breakfast, 14 Twinkies for breakfast every day is going to make your teeth fall out. 14 Twinkies for breakfast every day could make you fat. 14 Twinkies for breakfast every day could cause you to become diabetic if you're not already. You've got to stop eating 14 Twinkies a day. Okay, that's a valid set of words that you may not want to hear. That doesn't make them less valid just because you don't like to hear them. So I want you to understand that validity is not pleasant. Validity doesn't mean I like what you said to me, I appreciate what you said to me, I enjoy what you said to me. Validity means those words have merit. I mean, they really do have merit to them, and I should take them in. Now, some of those words, like keep your eye on the ball, they have a different level of validity. They really do mean something, but you've got to get to the understanding. I remember listening to a guy not too long ago mimic and almost mock a phrase that I've used many, many times. And it's a phrase whose philosophy I agree with. In fact, it's a phrase that defines this stage in my life better than anything else. But the person mocking the phrase was using it to challenge people to do more, to work harder. So here's what he said. The phrase is from Confucius from years and years ago, and it said, if you love what you do, you'll never work another day in your life. And his comment about that phrase was, if you become so lazy that you don't work anymore, basically you're retired. Which means your income's not going to grow, your influence is not going to grow, your opportunities are not going to grow, because you've pretty much checked out. You may love sitting on the front porch, but that's not work and that won't pay the bills. And I thought, that's an interesting way to attack the concept or the philosophy of the phrase. But here's what I find to be true. If you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. That doesn't mean you're not diligently pursuing. That doesn't mean you're not productive every day. That doesn't mean that you're not efficient at your efforts. It doesn't mean you're not showing up early and staying late every single day. It just means it doesn't feel like work. It's a labor that you love to do. It's a labor of love. It's effort that you want to exert because you want to see the success. That's entirely different than having a job that you despise, where going to work, you squeeze in the door as late as you can possibly get in without being fired, and you rush out as quickly as you can without getting fired, and you do as much work as you have to do, but there's no passion driving you to do it. Let me just tell you that people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and Richard Branson, these guys have not built global empires because they were dispassionate about what they do. These guys have not built legacy types of influence and levels of financial ramifications because it was a job. These people did work. Mother Teresa did work that they loved to do. And because they knew that, they understood that phrase, if you love what you do, you'll never work another day in your life. Find the work, the job, the career path, the education path that lights you up. The thing that makes you laugh and sing all at once, that one. The one that makes you laugh and cry at the same time and sing all at one time. That's your passion. And when you get your hands on that, and that becomes your career as well, oh man, the world is your oyster. You'll be climbing in and out of lobster buckets all day long and not paying any attention to other lobsters. You'll be climbing that banana tree and yanking the bananas off, and you don't care how many monkeys get wet. Yeah, those are references to past videos and chapters. The idea, though, that you let words sink into your mind that have no validity at all, words that can change the way you look at you, words that can impact whether or not you have hope and passion to move forward, or you simply give up. When you allow those words either into your mind or not, they will impact the relationship you have with yourself. And that can be a frightening, frightening idea. So I want you to step back for a moment and ask the question, when you hear those words that someone's speaking into your life, are those words valid? If you're telling me that I'm not smart enough for this job, do you really have the understanding of both the job and knowledge of me to make that statement? Or is that a random statement? You know, some people will simply throw those words out there because they want to bring you down, because it makes them feel better. Some people will call you names or demean your success with no validity at all because it makes them feel better about their own failure. So, is it valid? Next, we have to consider the source. I remember as a young guy in my early 20s, when I was still in the military, I was on a military base, and there was another friend who was a firefighter who had 2 little girls. His name was Mark Thomas. And Mark's little girls and I, we just loved each other. We just had a great relationship. I would go over and hang out at their house on the days that we had off because he and I were on the same schedule. And so we worked at the fire department all day together, and his wife would come up and we would hang out together at the station. And on off days, he and I would play racquetball together. And from time to time, I would watch the girls or spend the day with them so that Mark and his wife could go have a date night. And so there was one particular time that I had the girls all day. I think it was a Saturday. And we were at the base exchange, which is like a mall. And we were in the food court. And the girls and I had picked a table, and I asked them to sit at the table, and they were probably 4 and 6 or something like that. And I had gone to get in line. And I'm 20. I don't have any kids. I've never been married. I know nothing about kidding or parenting or anything other than what I learned growing up. And so the girls were probably 30 or 40 feet from me, and I'm standing in line. Now, I wouldn't recommend that for anybody these days because that's enough distance that if you can't close that gap fast enough, someone can steal your kids. This was 25 years ago. Little different world then. And in a little different place being on a military base with armed soldiers all over the place. But as I'm standing in line, I look over my shoulder, and one of the girls has not just is no longer sitting in her seat, she is no longer standing in her seat. She has climbed up on the back of the seat where the benches are back to back with another bench, and she is standing on the back of the bench between the seat where she was supposed to be sitting and the other person's seat. And when I saw her, I just looked at her, and in a very stern but very quick word said, "Sit down." She looked at me, she knew I was talking to her, and bam, she was on her backside and in the seat. And she just sat there. And the people standing in line next to me looked at her and looked at me and went, "Wow, how did you gain such control of your kids?" And all I could do was smile, because the truth of the answer is, those aren't my kids. I have no idea why that worked. I am clueless. Now, can you imagine, though, if I went home and told Mark, "Listen, here's what I did, works every time, you need to do this with your kids." I have no experience except for babysitting these 2 little girls, and we have a great relationship with each other. Well, I don't know anything about parenting. I've never changed their diapers. I don't know anything about them. I was just learning that there was such a thing as a personality at that point in my life. If I then started teaching lessons on parenting because I had one successful event where I said, "Sit down," and she did. Consider the source. Is that who you want to take parenting advice from? If you're the type of person who has never had children, never raised children, I encourage you to bite your tongue and think twice or maybe 25 times before you speak out to a parent about the way they parent their children. On the other hand, if you have raised children and grandchildren, or like in the case of Thelma Wells, she was raised by her great-grandmother. If you have been raised by your grandmother and your great-grandmother and you have a generational legacy of impacting young people, by all means, there are hundreds, if not thousands, perhaps millions of parents in their 20s right now who are like I was watching those little girls. They have no clue what they're doing. They have no idea. And some of them will admit it, and some of them will not. Now, I say this in all irony because I have 2 daughters right now. And both of my daughters, I have 2 daughters right now. I have had 2 daughters all of their lives. My 2 daughters are now mothers. And their children range in age from 15 or 16 months to 9 years old. I have some experience parenting. I have some experience parenting boys. I have 2 of my own. But it's amazing the instruction that I get when their children are left in my care. They're like, "Dad, don't do that." And I'm like, "How old are you? Because that never killed you. I mean, you've made it this far with my parenting style. Isn't that ironic?" But we do have to consider the source. Is the source, meaning the person speaking those words into your life, are they doing it with the best intent? Do they have any chance of knowing what they're talking about? Are the source of those words coming from the heart to make you better, to make your life easier, to make your life simpler, to bring success, to exhibit love? Or is this someone who has no idea what they're talking about? Think of some of the phrases that typify strange philosophies. So, foxhole religion, meaning they've been known to know faith, but only in the greatest crisis ever. When you're in battle and there's bullets flying over your head, it's real easy to claim there's a God. Or how about jailhouse lawyers? These are the guys that are sitting in the cell next to you. They've done something equally wrong that you have. That's why they're in the cell next to you. And they've probably studied, how am I going to get out of this? But that doesn't mean they know and understand the practice of law. So a jailhouse lawyer is probably not a good source for good advice. They may have wise sounding words, but if they had known and applied those wise sounding words, would they still be in the cell next to you? And maybe the concept of a jailhouse lawyer is similar to those people who look at you and they haven't had any success, but they want to tell you how to get success. I remember when I started in, and it's been almost 7 years now, when I started in the coaching industry, one of the first guys that I listened to was James Malinchak, and I just listened to a YouTube video that he had. And in this YouTube video, he talked about a relationship where he was at an event and there were a bunch of people who were speaking and training, and he got up and asked a question during the open forum time, and in the format of his question expressed his own level of intelligence and articulation and his ideologies. And when the event was over, a lady approached him and said, I would love to be able to coach you. If you will allow me to coach you, I believe I can make you a great public speaker and get you a lot of business. And he was a young guy in his 20s and hadn't had a lot of success at this point. And he said, well, tell me about your coaching process. How many people have you coached and how many speeches have you done? And she said, well, I haven't done a lot of speeches because I spend more of my time coaching. He said, okay, that's fair. You haven't done 1,000 speeches because you're coaching people. I get that. So how many people have you coached? She said, well, a handful. He said, well, how many of them do I know? I mean, how many of them are that you've coached them so good that they're now household names? And she said, well, all of them are still in the process. He said, so let me get this right. Last year I spoke 300 times, but you're going to coach me to speak more and better and get more jobs. But you've only coached a handful of people and none of them have yet spoken 300 times. Consider the source. If you're looking for advice from someone, the words that they speak into your life, the instructions they give you to take are going to be very, very impactful, especially if you intentionally surrender yourself to their teaching. Consider that source. Again, along with consider the source, you've got to understand that there will be people who want to speak into your life who have no good intentions. So the next question we have to ask is motivation. Now there's an equation. It's on the bottom of page 117. And this is an equation that I actually got from Dr. John Maxwell in his book, How Successful People Think. So it's a little tiny book. It's probably 100 and something pages. Really easy read, but some really deep ideas. If you get a chance to pick that up, I recommend it. It's got a little blue and white cover. When somebody speaks a strong word to you, always find the why behind it. So here's a formula or definition I recently discovered. Why equals motivation plus priorities. Why were those words spoken to you? What was the motivation or the speaker's priorities? Sometimes the words might ring true. The criticism might be constructive or the admonition right on target. But the motive behind it may be simply malicious. Sometimes the opposite is true. The motive is well intended and the heart is in the right place to make us a better employee or a father or a teacher. But the timing, the words, or even the sense of correction is too far off target to be helpful. So considering that, have you ever been critiqued about your parenting by someone who's never been a parent? Have you ever been given career advice by someone who's always unemployed or underemployed, or who hates their job? These are not good sources for the type of information they're offering you. And so that's part of my challenge, is to consider that source. But the motivation too is understanding why they're telling you that. Maybe you've actually experienced that moment when someone came to you and gave you advice, and you took the advice, and the results of the advice were tragic. I remember putting too much gasoline in the carburetor of my old car because my friend said, we have to prime it. I said, well, what does prime it mean? He said that means we put as much gas in the carburetor as what the fuel pump would put in the carburetor. And neither one of us had a clue what that was. As a result, when the car did start, we had a giant fireball from under the hood that cooked all the insulation off the inside of the hood. I thought the whole car was going to blow up because we put too much gasoline in there. So I did consider the words to be valid, that we do have to prime the carburetor, and I did consider the source to be knowledgeable. He knew something about it that I didn't know. But it turned out to be a calamity. There may be times that someone on your job has a different motivation. They really want to see you fail so that they look better. So they give you advice to turn in that report even though it's not done. And the first thing that happens is your boss comes back to you and says, how come your report isn't complete? And then hands the project off to the person who told you to go ahead and turn it in, and you find out it was to their benefit that you turned that report in too early, or that you closed out your sales on that process, or that you gave up on that prospect. When you get advice from someone else, you've got to consider the validity, consider the source. Is this person someone that I can trust with this type of information? And then consider the motivation. What are their priorities? So the why equals motivation plus priorities. What's important to them? Are you truly important to them? Is your success important to them? Is your accomplishment important to them? If it's not, those words, their why behind sharing those words may be driven by an opportunity to see you fail so that they look better. What are their priorities? And then what is their motivation? What causes them to do what they do? Whatever's motivating them to get a better job or to see you succeed. Those are the kind of questions that you're going to have to be asking in order to know, do I trust the source? Do I trust the motivation, the why behind the words that they're sharing with me? Are they speaking words to me in anger just to hurt me? I know you've had that experience as well. That someone just scathingly scolds or demeans or humiliates you so that they can see you hurt. I know that sounds vicious, but there are many, many people who do it. Abusers generally do that. Narcissists do it regularly. In fact, they kind of go around looking for people to wound because it makes them feel victorious to destroy someone else. And if you've ever been around someone like that, it may be a relationship that you're in, or a coworker, or a boss, or a friend who's abusing the person that they're in relationship with, and if you get too close, they feel like you may figure that out, and so they'll lash out at you. It's a scary, scary process. But the idea that they would lash out is about their motivation. What is it that they stand to lose if they don't control this situation, this relationship? And so those words will come in harsh ways. And we feel the wound of those words. But if we allow the validity of those words to ring in our mind and we think, well, what if they're right? What if I really am a scumbag? What if I really am a horrible father? What if I really am a terrible salesperson? What if I really should seek another job or leave my wife or my husband? What if they're right? If we start playing that out in our mind, but their motivation and the individual from whom those words came are not on par with what they should be, if their motivations are impure and the person that we heard them from is not a trustworthy person with our best interests at heart, then the validity of those words is going to begin to do damage in our life. So I want to really confront you on this one particular aspect. When we consider the source and we consider the motivation, I want you to hear these phrases real quick. And I want you to ask the question, because there's an implied validity, trustworthy source, and motivation. that we kind of give carte blanche to. We hear these words from this individual and instantly we believe, well, those must be true. And I should do something about that. And that source knows what they're talking about better than anybody else. And they probably have my best interest in mind. They're believable. I should take action on these words. I am never going to pass this test. I will never get that promotion. I am not attractive enough. I will never be loved like that. She will never forgive me for that. I am a loser. Sometimes the speaker's credibility, the person who speaks those words to you, they override all of the other things. They pass the validity test because it's an implied validity. If my wife were to say to me, "You're a terrible husband," nobody knows better than my wife what kind of husband I am. Nobody on earth knows what kind of husband I am better than my wife. If my wife were to speak those words, and she wouldn't, that's not her nature, number one. And number two, we've been working on our relationship for over 22 years now. It's not perfect, but it's much better than it was 15 years ago. So there was a season that I was a terrible husband, and even then, she wouldn't say it. She would say to me, "You're not the man I expected you to be." And her expectations still set out further for me. But when I look in the mirror and go, "You're a horrible husband. You're fat, you're ugly, you don't make enough money, you don't live the life that you say you live," all of those lies, because they come from my inner self, are given validity. I consider the source, and I instantly give them validity. I consider the source, and I assume the motivation is good, and that's not true. Because sometimes I get depressed, sometimes I get angry with me, sometimes I get heartbroken over something else that's gone wrong, and instantly I begin to speak negativity into my own life, and I look in the mirror and I go, "You're fat, you're unlovable, and nobody wants you. You're a horrible husband and a horrible provider and a horrible father." And then I begin to believe it. And that causes me to act like it's true, even though it's not. How do you overcome the liar when the liar is you? How do you overcome the words that have no validity at all when they're coming out of your mouth? How do you trust the source when you are the source? How do you judge the motivation of your own heart? There is an answer to that question. And the answer to that question is that you've got to change the input. Remember, I said every word that comes out of your mouth, your ears hear as well. So when you're looking in the mirror and you say to yourself, "You're fat and unlovable," your life will be driven by those comments. You will behave as if those words are true, even though they're not. I'll give you an example beyond myself. In the audio series Over the Top, Zig Ziglar said there was a season in my life that I struggled with my weight. And I remember telling my granddaughter, who at the time was only 2 years old or so, "Just call me Fat Man." And she learned my name as Fat Man. And I realized that I was living up to the reputation she was setting for me. That I was living up to the way that I perceived myself. And it caused me to not manage my diet. It caused me to not manage the way I exercised. It caused me to not manage my expectations of myself. And as a result, I got heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier. The day that I changed that statement in her mouth and in mine, "Don't call me Fat Man anymore. I'm no longer a fat man," my weight began to change. My health began to change. And as you know, Zig Ziglar lived to be over 90 years old. He ran or walked 4 miles every day. That challenge to simply change the way we perceive ourselves will change your life. I'm telling you right now, as simple as the mantras that you speak, the affirmations that you speak. Now you've got to find those things that are absolutely true, that no one can poke a hole in, that no one can come back and go, "Well, that's nice to say, but it's not true." Or, "Well, you say that, but," and they find an exception. You've got to find those things that you can look in the mirror and say, "I am a father of 4. No one can argue that point. It's not a value statement. It's not a judgment. It's a fact. I am a father of 4. I am a grandfather of 5. It's a fact. It's not a debate. It's not an argument. You can't undo it. It's a statement of fact. I've been married over 20 years. Now, I look at those things on my own personal judgment, and I see those as an accomplishment. I see those as great mile markers and milestones, and I'm proud of those things. And so the emotion that I attach to those statements of fact are irrevocable. Those are powerful understandings. And when you can build that script that you look in the mirror in the morning and you begin to say those words to yourself, all of the nonsense in the world about you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're too broke, you don't drive the right kind of car, you don't have the right kind of job, you don't live in the right kind of house, you don't have enough education, all of that silliness begins to fall to the wayside when you can look in the mirror and go, you know what? I don't care what anybody else thinks or says about me. If it has merit, if it's valid, if it's from a good source and they have a good motivation, I will consider it. I will consider the validation and the validity. I will consider the source and I will consider their motivation. That doesn't mean I'll take it to heart and change my life based on it, but I will consider it. And if it's invalid, it's out of here. And if the source is weak, it's out of here. And if the motivation is wrong, it's out of here. I'm not even going to entertain the notion that you might be right. Now, I'm going to tell you, that's a hard thing to do. It's much harder to do than it is to say. I still have those battles in life when someone comes alongside me or comes into my life and they're like, you need to change this and this and this and this and this and this. And the first thing I do is fall back into that mode and go, they're probably right. I'm a loser. I'm a failure. I'm fat. Nobody loves me. Because that's easy. The truth, though, is different than that perception. I want you to be able to do that. So I'm going to give you these words. These are in the book. And they are on page 113. I want you to get the book. I want you to hit rewind on this video. And I want you to listen to this until you can memorize it. I want you to write it down on a postcard. I want you to write it down on an index card. I want you to stick it on the mirror in your car. Stick it above your visor. Put one in your billfold. Put one right next to your cell phone in your purse or your handbag or your briefcase so that every day you see this phrase and you quote this phrase. I'm serious about this. When I teach this as a seminar, I make everyone in the room stand up. I don't care if it's 10 or 10,000. Everyone in the room has to stand up and say this with me. So I'm going to say it twice. The first time I'm just going to read it. And then the second time, I'm going to ask you, I don't care where you are. I don't care if you're standing in line at Starbucks or while you're watching this video, or if you are driving to work, or if you're already at work and you're sitting at your desk, or you're sitting at home with your kids. I'm going to challenge you after I read this the first time to stand up and read it out loud. Repeat it after me. And I will give you time in the statement to repeat it after me. First time I'm going to read it. I am the best me ever made. There is not another one. No one can be a better me. No one can live like me, smile like me, love like me. Today, I will be happy to be me, and I will be proud of me. I'm going to read that one more time, and then I'm going to read it slow enough for you to repeat with me. I am the best me ever made. There is not another one. No one can be a better me. No one can love like me, smile like me, laugh like me, or live like me. Today, I will be happy to be me, and I will be proud of me. Now, this has been a long video, but I will tell you, if you were to separate every other video, if you could take this one video and share it with everybody that you know, if you can practice this, if you could say to a stranger sleeping on the park bench, you are the best you ever made, and there will never be another one. You would impart to them so much hope, so much sense of direction, because the validity of these words is profound. The source of these words will only come from a pure heart. And the motivation of these words is to help you and me become better people. So my challenge to you is to use these words daily for yourself and for everybody around you. All right, one more time, and this time I want you to repeat after me. I don't care where you are. This is a brave, bold statement. You've got to be fearlessly in love with you and the hope for a better life. to live a more excellent life. You've got to be convinced of that and convicted. All right, enough stalling. Are you ready? Seriously, stand up right where you're at. Right now, I don't care where it is. Stand up and say these words. I am the best me ever made. There is not another one. No one can be a better me. No one can love like me, smile like me, laugh like me, or live like me. Today, I will be happy to be me, and I will be proud of me. I'm going to say this to you and about you. You are the best you ever made, and there will never, ever be another one. No one can be a better you. No one can love like you. No one can smile like you. No one can laugh like you. And no one can live like you. No one. Today, you should be happy to be you. And you should be proud to be you. If you can own that statement, you have the power to live a more excellent life. Go get your copy on Amazon, page 113. You've got to impart this to yourself and everyone you love. I'm J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.